So, episode 2 of Stay at Home Quarantine Video Podcast, Blog, whatever the right term is. Welcome to the Shades of Blue Soccer Show. With me, I have Dave Borchardt, old friend, longtime friend now. Actually, I credit you for even me doing this stuff a lot.
Well, I mean, I credit you for being one of the few media members that was out at practice regularly back in the early Wizards days under the new ownership group. So, at that point, I'm glad I helped you get more into the, soccer and events business, but you were always helping us get coverage at a time when, the team wasn't near as popular as they are today.
No, it's kind of cool because I go back and look at some of those photos and stuff now. I mean, they're terrible photos compared to what I think I can do now, but nobody was doing that back then. I mean, I feel like I challenged you guys. I challenged the team a little bit because I take pictures at training and people are like, oh, that's great. The next thing I know, you guys would be sending photographers out every once in a while to take pictures at training.
Well, and now look at where it's evolved to today, right? All these teams have full-time content teams inside the office that are doing podcasts and video interviews and video features and photography, like you said. And, one of the things I did way back in the day was I got social media thrown on my plate, which it was pretty much brand new back then in terms of Twitter. So, I mean, obviously that's a full-time gig now for usually multiple people. So I think you were ahead of the time in terms of somebody's there taking photos most days of practice. And now there's probably 3 or 4 people every day just from the team out there gathering content.
Well, I know on a regular basis, there's one definitely doing it every day out there. But at games, there's whole teams now. They're trading cards in and out like it was a Super Bowl and running over, and people, they're posting photos during the game. So I'm playing catch up a little bit on that. My latest body, I can send photos to my phone and posting them from Instagram. So I've been posting photos during the game on Instagram from the sidelines.
That's pretty cool. And so this is a dumb question, but do you edit those at all? Or do you just look at them, make sure they're decent, and then they get uploaded? Or what does that look like?
I pick ones that I don't need to edit much. Yeah. I mean, I don't really do any editing. That's the benefit that the sporting guys have. They have a table sitting, I think, on the south stand, or right by the wall in the south stand, and they're bringing cards over, and they have 2 or 3 people editing while they're doing this and doing social media and all that type of stuff during the game from there. I keep waiting for a misplaced shot to take them all out. But
that's funny. Well, are you doing okay with the with this whole stay-at-home order? I mean, you're an events guy. That's kind of what you do. Or do you have the itch to get back? Or are you doing all right?
I really have been kind of. It feels more like you're interviewing me now. I've been kind of slowing down on the event stuff anyway. Just getting older and don't want to fight with people as much, and there's people doing it for way too cheap. So kind of comes and goes, but I've been doing a little bit less of events and a little bit more of some other sports and some family stuff and things like that.
Well, I'm definitely itching to get back to sporting games. My gosh, I mean, the team's off to such a good start. Guys like Felipe Gutierrez will be healthy, when the season resumes theoretically, and they're always fit. I assume they're staying in shape pretty well at home. And man, I'm just dying to get. I was about to say get back out there. Maybe at first we won't be out there. I don't know. Maybe it's just the team playing in a stadium. But I need some live sports in my life, man. And
I know,
especially the way this team looks like they could be. I can't wait for sporting to get going again.
It should be a very, very fun and interesting team. But talking about Felipe, the last day, the day that everything stopped, I was out at sporting, and I asked Peter how Felipe was doing, and he was like, "Oh, he's actually coming back into practice this week."
So yeah, I mean, theoretically, he's 100% whenever they resume. He just needs to get game fit, which I guess that would be something with all the guys, no matter what they're doing at home, staying in shape. I assume they'd need a few weeks to ramp up and get in semi-game shape.
Yeah, everything I've heard would be 2 to 3 weeks of preseason again, which, won't put them in complete game shape, but everybody will be in that spot. I kind of think, though, it'll hurt sporting worse than the other teams because so much of it is predicated on them being so fit and going all 90 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That is something that it's always been talked about, sporting fit with Peter Vermees, and maybe expecting a little bit more than any other team. I know a lot of teams probably think of themselves the same way, but I think it's been true with sporting. I mean, it has to be when the season's this long. It's super hot in Kansas City in the summers, which is hard to play through. So,
Yep.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing too. Like, how have each of these teams handled the break? I mean, I'm sure each team is giving their players workouts to do at home and stuff like that, but I think it'll be a pretty good test of, you know, who has the best medical team, who has the best training staff that's actually, you know, taking care of the players the best, because I'm sure there's some teams that aren't doing near as well. And I assume sporting's probably near the top in terms of what they're making the players do and how they're tracking everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some of that, but I mean, I know like they've Joey, the trainer now, he's been doing Zoom workouts with them. He's had like the experienced players, the older players, the leaders, the Espinozas, Beaslers, that those kind of guys. Russell actually lead smaller workouts. You know, so they that way they have like a, you know, maybe Russell leads the forward line, maybe Beasler leads the defensive line, you know, that sort of thing, to keep them kind of in a little bit of the camaraderie and the team atmosphere at the same time.
I mean, that's a lot better than if you're just sitting at your house by yourself doing a 30-minute workout. I mean, that would kind of stink. So that's cool. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm sure the Zoom stock that we're using and that they're using is soared in the last 2 months, along with Netflix and all these other streaming services. But I may have done a handful of Zoom calls in my life before the coronavirus outbreak, and now I feel like I have 3 or 4 days. So it's definitely a good platform.
Yeah, that's it's kind of funny because my wife actually used my computer to do a Zoom call, you know, 3 or 4 months ago. So the first Zoom call I got on, it had my wife's name in the little window. I'm sitting there like, how do I change that?
Yeah, I've had to do the same thing because in my work, I work now for the Kansas City Sports Commission, and we're a nonprofit. So, you know, we look at all of our expenses real closely. So we have one Zoom premium account that'll allow you to, you know, host meetings for more than 40 minutes, I think is what the cutoff is. So it's not under my name. So we were doing a Facebook Live broadcast last week, and I had to go in real quick and change it from one of my female coworkers' names into my name, just because it looks weird if I'm talking and it says Jessica on the screen, but that was about to happen.
Yeah, actually, I dialed into FC Cincy's, or I joined their Zoom meeting for talking to some players, or to the coach actually on that one, and it had my wife's name up there. So I actually sent the guy like, "That's my wife's name, just so you don't kick me out," because I couldn't figure out how to change it at that point.
It's funny. Well, I'll tell you, it's one of my, I know we don't want to get too far off track, but one of my favorite things about Zoom is it's super easy to figure out. I mean,
yeah,
it's almost impossible. Like if you looked for a minute and you weren't stressing out about talking live, like you can pretty much figure out how to put your video on, how to unmute your mic, and like you said, even change your name. And I mean, I'm not super tech savvy, but I bought this green screen for $15 off Amazon about a month ago, and you know, it's 2 clicks to put up a photo. So
yep.
It's pretty good platform.
I might have to do that too. So if I'm going to do more of these instead of the stupid white door behind me, I did rearrange some bobblehead boxes.
Yeah, that's cool. You got some Swap Park Rangers too, it looks like.
Yep, that's kind of my favorites there.
So do you unbox them, or do you just always leave them sealed?
I have some in both conditions. So
okay. Jimmy, Time Warner Cable one. I have one of those.
You remember when you guys were doing the promo with that, and he was like standing there talking with it, and Hercules Gomez was behind him making fun of him?
Yeah, I remember that. One of my all-time favorites with Jimmy, which, by the way, I saw him on national TV, I think it was Saturday, doing esports on ESPN as like an announcer, which is awesome. So he's obviously continued to do great in his post-playing career. But one of my all-time favorite things with Jimmy was the Beasler Wants Waffles commercial, which I don't know if you remember that from Time Warner Cable, but I believe that was Beasler as a rookie, Hercules Gomez, Dave Borchardt, and Jimmy Conrad. And, you know, Beasler looked so young at that point. He looked like he was about 12. I think he must have been 21 or 22. But, the whole gag was he got pancakes and wanted waffles, and Jimmy Conrad stepped on the pancakes with his cleat to make it look like a waffle. So it was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. I have to go back and actually look at some of those old Time Warner and Metro Sports commercials, like probably once a year. That one, the Mojo Time, the one where I think it was Hartman had the wall come block it for the sun while he was eating or something, you know. Those
Speaking
are
of Hartman and the sun, you remember in the Community America ballpark days where he had to wear a baseball cap a couple times because the sun was going down?
Yep.
I guess he would have been at the east side of the field. And that was always weird. I always thought that was weird to see a guy in a baseball cap at a soccer game.
It's actually I was looking through some old photos for I've been trying to like every day or two or so post an old photo on Instagram, just throwing something else up there, and found some with him with the ball cap, but like both goalies had ball caps on in that one game. I don't know if they both had them on at the same time or just when they switched ends. But I found one where Blanco kicked him in the head.
It's funny. Sorry, my 10-year-old just came up with his school computer, and he was showing me that he found the Beasler Wants Waffles commercial. So that's going on in our house right now. It is still on YouTube if anyone hasn't seen it. Did you say something about Blanco? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you remember there was because he was with Chicago, and there was Blanco. I found a shot of Blanco kicking Hartman in the head.
Oh, that's funny.
And him and Jimmy Conrad trying to get into it afterwards, but it was the soccer fight. Just
So I remember it was such a big deal when Blanco came to the league and when he came to play at, I guess back then it was Community America Ballpark. And I know when I was with the team from 2008 to 2011, we made a big push to really connect more with the local Hispanic community and get more fans to come out. And I worked closely with Hector, who's obviously the super fan of all Kansas City soccer fans, to start up LaBarre KC, which was essentially like the cauldron for the Hispanic community. But I remember games like that when Blanco would come, or teams from Mexico, and the Hispanic community a lot of times would come out, but they'd be supporting the other team or those key players. And it's cool to see how far the team has come on that front. I mean, obviously there's tons of spectators now and fans of every race and every nationality. But back then I remember it was a huge deal when Blanco came. And I think in the history of my time really closely following the league, which is really, I got into it pretty seriously around the mid 2000s, 2005-ish. I feel like Blanco and Zlatan were the two stars that probably walked the most out of anyone. I mean, if they didn't have the ball or didn't have a good chance to get it, there was a lot of walking going on with those two guys. And obviously Zlatan was still great here during his last few years. I know Blanco was kind of at the end of the road, but you still saw the skill. Like when he got the ball, he could do incredible things just with his touch. And I mean, at that point, he was a little bit overweight and old and pretty slow, but you could still see the skill. And that was always cool to see. And that was about the time when really all those big foreign stars started coming into the league. Same thing with David Beckham. I mean, when he had that first game at Community America, that was crazy to see. And people tell the story about how they had training out there one day and he kicked a ball through the bullseye, like in the T-bone sign out there. So
I was there.
It was, I mean, what a cool time to be around the league. I mean, for me, I kind of felt like with the new ownership group, it sort of felt like being part of a startup. That's something I haven't ever experienced in my life in terms of like a tech company. But man, there was all sorts of creative people, and just, if you got an idea, we'll try it out and see if it works. And obviously the new stadium was a big hit. The new brand was a big hit. The team was winning, like all those things worked out. But I was thinking about this earlier before we started talking. It was just a great mix of creative people too. Lots of people really passionate, good ideas, and a lot of people that are still there today. I left in 2011, and I still have my foot in the door, doing the Final Whistle post-game show, which I love doing. But there's definitely some days I miss being there because what a great place to work. And it's continued under the leadership of Jake Reed, who, when I left, he was there. I think he may have been vice president of sales or something at that point. But he's worked his way up, and I'm really happy for him. I mean, what a great guy, somebody that's truly passionate about Kansas City and soccer in general. And
I know.
It was fun times.
He gets a lot of unfair criticism from some fans, but it's I mean, some of it's probably deserved every once in a while, but he's really not as bad as what a lot of people are trying to make him out to be sometimes. He's a good guy.
Yeah, and I haven't seen a lot of criticism. I'll tell you, just like, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, whatever. Like, I just judge people. I try not to judge people first off, but I really judge people on, are you a nice person? Do you treat me nice? Do you treat other people nice? How do you treat your family? He's one of the nicest guys I know. So I'm sure in every sport, there's fans that get frustrated with whatever. It's parking, it's concession prices, it's whatever that stuff is. There's always things fans would like to see better, but I've never met a nicer executive than Jake Reed. I mean, great guy, and he really cares what the fans want. Now, granted, it's a business. You can't always do exactly what the fans want, but I think he's always thinking about it, and he would never do anything with bad intentions as far as I'm concerned.
And I think a lot of changes they made this year was at least attempting to resolve some of the complaints that people had, better food and things like that. And obviously, we haven't really found out how good the food was because we were only there once. But.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the one game, it's so weird to think about. I remember the game that was this year that was the home opener, I believe. Right when we got to the stadium, we looked at our phones and found out they had just reported the first case of coronavirus in Johnson County. I think it was like that same afternoon. But we had 4 other friends that met us. We tailgated, we had a few beers, kicked the soccer ball around.
Yep.
And then you think about, 2 weeks later, the whole world's changed and we're still in that, stay-at-home order right now. So, I don't know when it'll happen, but I can't wait to get back out. But I guess my point is that game, I didn't get to try the new food either because we were so stuffed from burgers and brats in the parking lot, which was great. And I can't wait to get back to do that again.
So, well, you were talking earlier about how you were there when, the rebrand and all that stuff was going on. It seemed like it was like almost a perfect storm of how things went, if you look back at it. Because Sporting Kansas City's name is, everybody accepts it now, and everybody's, I won't say everybody's happy, but because there's always the complainers. But it's just so accepted now. But everybody wasn't always happy with that. It was a Euro poser name, all these things. But at that time, there's just so many like little things that happened over that year of the rebrand that just, I think, got a lot more fans engaged. And a lot of it, some of it was spontaneous, and some of it was well thought out and planned, or some of it was dumped upon, to make the most of it. But remember Kai doing the Snowmageddon snow game, snowball fight.
Yeah.
There was a couple hundred people showed up in the midst of a massive snowstorm to play snow soccer and watch players slide down the hill and have a snowball fight, and then go eat Chipotle.
And like I said a minute ago, that is kind of what I'm talking about when I said like it felt like a startup. Like Kai put something out there that said, I've never seen the snow or never made a snow angel or whatever he said.
Yeah.
And we just said like, hey, how about you do a snowball fight with the fans and buy him Chipotle? And he's like, great. So, and then the next day we did it. So, and that was, if I remember right, that was right after the rebrand. And I believe it was before the 2011 season because I remember John Kempen was one of the guys that showed up and he had a Wizards jacket on. And I told him, I go, please take off the Wizards jacket because you guys are Sporting KC now, which he did. But like things like that were so cool. And like you said, it was really a perfect storm. I think the other thing some people maybe don't remember that worked out really in the favor of Sporting was, on top of the stadium being perfect, the colors being awesome, the jerseys were great. The team started winning almost every game, it seemed like, once they moved into the stadium after the opener that was kind of a dud. On top of that, the stadium was great, and the Chiefs and Royals had older stadiums. They're still awesome stadiums, but, when the Kansas City hadn't had a real new stadium for, since 1972, unless you want to count Sprint Center, which isn't a full-time sports venue. So it was that cool factor of having a new stadium that was super state-of-the-art. There was no bad views. And then the other thing, at that moment in time, Chiefs were sort of struggling. The Royals were sort of struggling. And we know how good of a sports town Kansas City is. So you give them a great new stadium with essentially a new team to a lot of fans. They'd never, followed the Wizards that closely. And then these fans are just dying for a winner. It was just this perfect storm. So it was pretty amazing, to be honest. And that team just stormed into the playoffs and, nearly made a run at MLS Cup that year, even though it was up until June 1st, they were having a horrible season. And there was talk about, is Peter Vermees on the hot seat? And then, he goes on a tear with, a great young core of just unbelievable attacking players, plus an improving young defense. So
with
it was a great
hometown
team.
Guys in there.
Yeah.
Players that were, you were being kind when you say the Royals were kind of struggling. They pretty much weren't very good through a lot of that time. And the Chiefs were really disappointing even when they were making the playoffs. But so then Sporting becomes a winner, and the players were far more accessible than those teams that were not doing well. I mean, players were in the market, and you could go to the members club and see them dancing and all kinds of stuff.
Well, and the other thing back then, they were way more active on social media than NFL players and MLB players. And I think now kind of everybody does it, but that was a good niche back then too. I mean,
Yep.
People loved Kai because he had a big personality and he scored goals, but they also loved him because he was great on social media and he was fun to watch. And, you know, we all loved the kit man, Mike Flaherty. I remember one day when I worked there, I went up to him and said, you need to get on Twitter. And he was, you know, asking what Twitter is or whatever. And now he's a classic on social media. So like Sporting was ahead of the curve on that stuff too. And like I said, for a while I managed that for them, but really it was Kyle Rogers who got it started and was making a huge impact on the social media front. So he got it started and I just kind of babysat it until I left. But that was a big niche for the team too. I mean, they were ahead of the curve with not just on the field and great stadium, but really they were social media savvy early on.
Yep, and continue to be. I mean, I do feel like they probably do a few little too many paid advertisements and a little bit less content at times than they used to, but it still is really good. Speaking of Kyle, isn't he the one that got Ocho Cinco here for the trial?
Yeah, that was Kyle and I both. We're kind of interacting with him on Twitter, and then it eventually got to me starting to send him direct messages, and he'd say things like, I'm in, and then I would get with Rob Thompson, Robo, and I said, Ocho Cinco says he's in, so do we really want to do this? And then, you know, Rob's talking to Peter Vermees, and it was funny, like Robo and I ended up picking him up at the airport, whatever it was, a week or two after we talked to him. I was talking to him like a whole weekend on Twitter, just direct messaging. And even though he said he was coming, even though Peter had approved it, I was a little surprised when he actually landed at the airport and showed up, just because I think he has a little bit of a reputation for being like a huge personality. And I don't know if I'd say he's a flake. I don't know if that's fair, but I know we didn't know for sure that he was actually showing up. And, you know, he did. I know one of the highlights nobody knows about for me is I got to drive him to take a tour of the stadium when it was still under construction. And then I got to drive him through McDonald's and buy his lunch. He got like a filet of fish Happy Meal, which, you know, it wasn't the healthiest thing, but no, it's cool. Just he had the hard hat on. We did the tour of the stadium. And, you know, it's funny to think about someone like him that if he would have focused on soccer starting at age 10 instead of football, he could have been a star. He had the physical skills as good as anyone in MLS, maybe as good as anyone in MLS history in terms of speed and athleticism. But yeah, he just obviously hadn't played since he was 10 or 12. It had been 15 or 20 years. He didn't have much of a touch, but there were still a few times at the scrimmages where we saw him on the wing and just sprint past everyone. And it was kind of fun to see. I mean, the guy loves soccer for sure.
Yeah, you knew that he had a clue about soccer, but like you said, he didn't play enough to have a good touch. I mean, there was, you know, academy kids out there that were half his age and, you know, a third his size outplaying him. But he was having fun and he cared about soccer. You know, because I mean, you were there for. Sometimes you bring in guest athletes from other sports, and they don't take it very seriously when they come out there to do it. And a lot of times they're just kind of poo-pooing it. They're only doing it because they have to. I'm not going to mention any names or teams or.
You should probably mention. You probably should mention one. I mean, you've teased the viewers. Who's the one you can mention that won't get you in trouble?
Well, I'm not going to get in trouble no matter what because I don't really care. But we'll just say there were some baseball players out there one time that I think just couldn't care less, and they thought it was totally stupid. There's also probably a NASCAR driver out there that kind of felt the same way.
I remember one time Bruce Chen came out for the Royals, and he loved soccer. Yeah. So I know he had a good time. Okay, I'll tell you a story. Have you heard the Coldplay story from back in the day?
I don't think so.
So we like with Ocho Cinco, one thing we were trying to do in the PR team was we need to do whatever we can to get coverage. Because like we said earlier, the local news isn't covering the Wizards like they're covering the Chiefs and the Royals and back then MUK, UK State. It certainly changed. But you know, part of the reason with Ocho Cinco, and you saw it, was the biggest media turnout we'd ever had, like not counting when Manchester United came to town. Every TV station was there, every sports station, all that stuff. And
ESPN had a crew following him around.
Yeah, they did. And it got on Sports Center that week. So, but so one of the things I did, if there were concerts coming to town or bands and they had some sort of connection to soccer, I would try to get them to come out to practice and do, watch practice, maybe take a penalty kick afterwards, pass the ball with the guys for 5 minutes, talk to the media, whatever, just to try to drum up some coverage. So like Rod Stewart, for example, would come to town and like monster soccer fan. Yeah. Tried to get him out a few times. It never worked out. And back when Coldplay was pretty big, I knew they were big soccer fans. They're all London guys, English guys. And so I was talking to the reps in LA for like 3 months saying like, hey, we'd love to get them to come to practice. We'll give them jerseys. They can kick the ball, blah, blah, blah. And they said, okay, great. They love to do it. And, it was awesome. And then like 2 days before they said, oh, they're not gonna be able to make it now. We're really sorry, but we'd like to, we'd like for you and the players to be our guest at the concert. We'll give everybody a ticket, which was super nice. We said, oh, that's great. So I think they gave us 30 tickets. We gave out a ticket to each player, each coach, assistant coach, and then I had a ticket just because I had talked to them all. But there were some people that didn't get tickets, like the owners, which at that time I didn't even think about it. It was just like, okay, well, they said they wanted a ticket for all the team, and everybody got a ticket. So we showed up. They said, show up at the box office, and I sent them the list of names, and they said the tickets will be under everybody's name. So we showed up, and at the box office, there's an envelope, and it's a ticket, and along with the ticket was a backstage pass. So they had the whole team backstage to meet the band, and they were the nicest guys in the world. And the only people backstage were the players, and then there was one other musician who they had known previously in his family. So it was like this guy, his wife, and 2 kids, and then like our soccer team. And they could not have been nicer. We said, and it was funny, Jimmy back then was the captain. He's like, Jimmy Conrad, captain of the Wizards, nice to meet you. And it was funny because they said like, next time we'd love to have you out to practice. We know it didn't work out. And they said, no, next time we want to come out to a game. And I know there was even talk before I left. I think I had reached out to them to see if they'd be, willing to come out and play a concert the first night the stadium opened and stuff like that. And the cost was like astronomical because at that point they were getting to be one of the top bands in the world. But that was just such a cool, moment in my life. I know, that whole surprise and delight concept is something that Disney is made help make them real popular. And that was about the most surprised and delighted I've ever been. I showed up thinking I was going to get a ticket at the top of the arena, and they were actually good seats too. They were kind of back at the lower level on the floor, like back by the sound mixing equipment, and just getting to go backstage and meet one of the biggest bands. That was really cool. Really cool.
Yeah, it's got to be, a lot of the things that you guys got to do, a couple times I got to tag along for certain things when you guys went to see the stealth bomber.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was cool. How many people in the world have been inside a stealth bomber? That was pretty amazing. And yeah, it was me and 3 or 4 players. And I know they said, don't take your phones out. Don't take pictures inside the stealth. It's all top secret, but it was pretty cool. And I remember thinking like, how do these guys fly in that thing for 10 hours in this little cramped, you couldn't believe it unless you see it. It's super cramped, just 2 guys in there. And it was pretty cool. And I'm sure it maybe even meant more to you with the military background, seeing that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then I actually ended up having a relative be one of the mechanics for him a couple years later. But I have a picture of Jimmy holding up his bobblehead inside the stealth. I'm outside, so I wasn't breaking any rules.
It's funny. Yeah, I'll tell you, some of my other favorite memories from back then is just, like you said, the guys were so much more accessible than baseball or football players, but they were also just like normal guys. And I think they still are to a large extent in Major League Soccer, but I haven't always
slowly changing though.
I'm sure it's changed some. But back then it was like me talking to Jimmy Conrad is like me talking to you. He's just a totally normal guy, great person. And that was one of the best parts too. You always have 1 or 2 people in the locker room that maybe aren't the most friendly person in the world, but like 99% of the people back then love soccer, love being here, and we're just great guys to talk to. So that's why it felt so good for things like the Open Cup titles and MLS Cup title. Jimmy Nielsen, is one of the nicest guys out there. So like seeing him hoist a trophy with broken ribs, just crazy. And same thing with Matt Beasler, Graham Zusi, Roger Espinoza, just great guys. And
Yep.
That's one of my favorite things about the team. And like you said, over time, it'll change a little bit for sure. MLS is getting bigger in popularity and all that stuff, but it's just different. I mean, I worked in the media from 1999 to 2008 before I joined the team at Sports Radio 810. And I never felt like I was friends with the Chiefs player in the locker room or with the Royals player in the locker room, but you felt like you were everybody's friend if you were covering the Wizards and early days of Sporting KC. And even for me, especially being part of the team, and those guys were the best.
So, when we do these sort of things, you always got to ask like the weird questions, right? I'm not going to put you on a too bad of a spot, but if there was one player, one coach that's not with the team right now that you could bring back to have them be some capacity with the team, just so they were here, who would it be?
Oh man, that's not what I thought you were going to ask. So one former player or coach that's not currently with the team that we could bring back to be involved in some way. Okay, now, can I use a time machine and can I say like, I want Jimmy Nielsen from 2011 to be the goalkeeper? And that's not what I'm going to say, by the way. Like, we have open rules, or do you just want someone currently in their current life?
Use whatever rules you want to, man.
Okay. I mean, I know Jimmy Nielsen's back in town. I think it would be pretty cool if he was the goalkeeper coach or something like that. Not that I want the goalkeeper coach fired, but like having somebody like him back involved as an announcer, or, the Chiefs do a lot with the Chiefs ambassadors that are the former players. And maybe that's already something Jimmy does. I'm not sure, but I've seen photos of him in Kansas City. I think he's back here full time. And yeah, I'd love to have him have some sort of role with the team, just because he's just a great personality, and obviously one of those legends from when the team went. He was here when it was the Wizards. He was here when it was Sporting. He was, that guy that helped bring the title here and then retired on top, which very few athletes get to do. So he'd be the first guy to jump out at me. If you could tell me I could time warp someone, I'd love to add in Preki from 2000 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's bring him back and just throw him in the squad. That would be pretty cool.
2000 when he was just old, not really old.
Yeah. Although it's crazy to think he, wins MVP of the league when I guess he's really old.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing.
It would be great to be able to take a Preki from 2000 and put him into the league right now. The guy was obviously talented enough to play in England, at least some, and things like that. But to see how he would do currently, the talent level just keeps getting better. The athletes just keep getting better. The people who lived their entire life playing soccer are playing it now, where, a lot of those older guys, maybe, they didn't have academies. They were playing college and playing two sports when they were in high school and these things like that. But, these guys like Busio and Lindsay, they pretty much do nothing but soccer.
I bet that being said, even if Preki did multiple sports, which I've heard he's like a great basketball player too, if he had the modern day nutrition and modern day training, I think he'd still be a star in the current league. I mean, I was talking to my 10-year-old because we were watching the SKC Classic game last week, which was the 6-4 game against Columbus, like the fourth game in MLS history for each team. And I told him, I'm like, Preki was sort of like our Messi. I mean, you would never say he's as good as Messi, but watching him on the ball and the stuff he did, I mean, it's crazy to watch.
Yeah, I remember Ron Newman saying, he could pick your back pocket with his left foot, that sort of thing. And he was just so talented, and you knew where he was going to go. You knew he was going to go left like 98% of the time, and you still didn't stop him.
And it's funny, the classic game last week, he had 2 or 3 great shots with his right foot, including a right-footed goal, which was pretty surprising because, like you said, he's one of those guys that I'd remembered that all he does is touch it with his left foot, but he was good at both. But when you have a left foot that's a 10 out of 10 and you have a right foot that's a 7.5 out of 10, you're going to use your left foot most of the time for sure.
Yeah,
although the thing that stinks for me is I'm terrible at soccer in general. So the fact I get thrown into these media games and the only thing I can really offer is like fitness and running. And anytime I get the ball, I just need to find someone else who's good.
I just foul people.
You're the enforcer. You're like Roger Espinoza.
Much slower.
Well,
yeah.
I'll call you Red Card Bell. That'll be your new media game nickname.
That should be a goal that I try to get, is a red card in a media game.
I mean, I've never seen it happen.
Man,
although one time Jake Gutierrez took out Dynamo the Dragon, and he may have
Yep.
been shown a fake red card back then. I think you have good photos of that, if I remember right.
I do. That was actually one of my favorite moments because I hate mascots. But
is this like a phobia? Is this like a clown thing? Or?
no.
Okay.
They just annoy me.
Okay.
I'm watching a game. I don't want a mascot to come stand in front of me trying to high five me.
What if it was a game you didn't care as much about? Like, what if it was I don't know, NBA game or something that you're not that into? You still don't like him?
Probably wouldn't be there.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just probably not.
Tell you what, if I'm sure you know this, but those mascot costumes don't smell that good once you get to about July 1st and you're stuck in an elevator with one of those guys.
Yeah, no, I do. I've been around enough of them now, and at the Comets games and at Wizards games and FC Kansas City games, and yeah, and it was the same guy for a lot of those.
It was, yep.
Yeah, no. When I asked that question earlier, what question did you think I was going to ask?
Well, we had just gotten done talking about how the guys were all so nice and approachable, and I thought you were going to say who was one player or coach that you used to work with who was not, a super nice guy. And I don't know if I had anybody back then that I'd say was not a super nice guy. I would say that Claudio Lopez was a guy with a different personality because he was used to being a star of the world. And
Yep.
so like when he came here, most guys I'd be like, hey, Kai, we got this interview. And he'd walk off the field and do them boom, boom, boom. Lopez, I'd never know if he'd talk to people. Like there was one time I said, hey, Claudio, this is like a Friday training. I'm like, hey, this guy drove all the way up here from Arkansas. He'd love to talk to you for 2 minutes. He's like, okay, I'll do it after my shower. And then like an hour later, he still hadn't talked to the guy. And I felt so bad. But like that was sort of him. He was used to a player being a star and being less approachable. And he didn't have the mentality of most MLS guys who never grew up with that. So he was one of the guys that was, I'd say, a little bit different personality. Not a bad guy at all, but just maybe not as easy going.
Yeah, I do remember some of those, and there's a few players who didn't want to ever talk to the media. But when I first started doing this, I mean, because I kind of backed into all this, I just came out as a fan taking pictures one day, and the next thing I realized is if I was taking pictures, you would let me take pictures at a game, and then when I did that, and I'm like, hey, am I media now? And you went, well, kind of, sort of. And I said, well, can I interview somebody? And I think your response was, well, yeah, but not somebody that's like first team, like a rookie or,
you had to pay your dues.
Or maybe, not the coach, but, maybe the technical director, the general manager, a guy named Vermees, right?
No, we had to make sure, you weren't going to be horribly, inappropriate, but you did fine. And pretty quick, you were doing like, some days I'd come in and you'd be like in Vermees' office by yourself, just talking to him, like, or Anolfo. I don't know who it was back then, but
no, Vermees.
Yeah, I mean, you may have. I was gonna say you may have had one or two times that, yeah, you had to start at the bottom end of the totem pole, but it didn't take you long to where you were pretty much a full-fledged media member. And that was another thing back then that was really the start of blogs being a fairly big thing in terms of a blogger is pretty much the same as a media member. But I think we were feeling our way through that as well. Like.
There was
this isn't the Kansas City Star, but he's still covering the team and he wants to promote us, so why not?
And again, I really appreciate that, and I still appreciate it. I mean, like every year I turn in a media credential, I'm waiting to see if it actually gets approved.
That's funny.
But yeah, I remember there was actually I think it was when one of the stadium projects. I don't know if it was the current one or the previous one that was going to be a banister, but there was a press conference or a media meeting that was just bloggers. So it was like soccer guy, like a couple of us soccer bloggers and other sports bloggers and like Kansas City, community bloggers and stuff like that. So,
well, I'll tell you, one of the things I'm most proud of in my whole career is to see what sporting has gotten to today, because back then, and I don't mean this to sound bad at all, but back then they needed every blogger, they needed every person to spread the word about the team, because soccer in the media was not mainstream at all. I mean, The TV media would cover Chiefs, Royals, MU basketball, MU football, same with KU, K-State. And then like they just either didn't have enough capacity to do more or didn't care to do more, because to be honest, they knew way more people cared about the Chiefs than the Wizards in 2008 when I started with the team. And I'm so proud just how much more mainstream it is now. I mean, if you're going to watch a newscast on Saturday night, I'd be shocked if you don't see Sporting KC highlights, but that wasn't the case about 10 years ago. And just seeing how far it's come is a great thing. And I think guys like yourself who were there when no one else was there, I mean, that was huge coverage. And now it's gotten so much more mainstream where, you know, mainstream sports fans now also love sporting, but back then it was kind of like only the hardcore soccer fans. And it's cool to see how that's grown on the media side and on the fan side.
Yeah, when I was out there, again, I'm not going to mention any direct names, but the star beat writer for the Wizards would come to one practice, and I don't think he would even come to the practice. He would just come to the press conference, and then he would write some generic story that probably he asked you most of the questions for, and then he would go.
Would this be Randy or a different one?
Different one.
Okay, because it was fun. So Randy Kovitz covered the team a little bit, and Terez Taylor was a guy who got thrown onto the beat. And now Terez is like a mega media star, which is great. Like, great for him. He's an awesome guy.
Not talking about Terez. Okay. He actually dug in and he did real stuff.
And I give him credit too, because he came in, and I think he'd admit this, like, he didn't know hardly anything about soccer. Nothing. Like, he was a football guy, and he asked me so many questions in practice and in the press box during games. And I enjoyed helping him kind of learn the sport, because I haven't always been like a diehard soccer fan. Like I said, I got into it pretty seriously starting around 2005, and I went from being a mainstream sports fan, baseball, basketball, football, to like falling in love with the sport. And I think I don't know if he ever got to where he fell in love with the sport, but he definitely made the progression of not knowing much to he's always been a good storyteller, and he became a good beat writer for the team. And then of course now he's gone on to bigger and better things, but it was fun. And it was interesting too. Like, TV media too would come out, and like sometimes they didn't know what to ask at practice. So things like the Ocho Cinco thing at least made it a little bit easier.
Oh yeah, no, I remember a lot of them coming to the press conference in the little hut out there outside the training center. There'd be, you know, cold pizza and cookies and things like that. But they would come out and like, okay, Dave, well, who's doing good this week? And start asking you questions about all that stuff, because they didn't look at anything. They didn't watch the game before that. Terez did a great job, and there's been some very good writers. That's one of the reasons I started caring and started doing some of this stuff, because the Star really didn't actually write anything that was relevant.
So I'll ask you a question, even though you're the interviewer. So what's been maybe your favorite interview you've done over the years? Like either an audio interview or a one-on-one with Peter. Is there something that jumps out to you as like super memorable?
Well, I'm going to give you two. And one of them was with Vermees, sitting on those steps there at the training center. Because remember, they had the steps come down. He was just sitting there, and we talked for a long time. I mean, it was probably an hour, and he just gave me so much good information just sitting there. It was like one of my first real, like, I got really good information kind of things. And I wrote up some stuff, and I remember like several national guys used my quotes without attribution.
That's rough.
Yeah.
That's when you know you've made it. You get the one-on-one with the coach, and then they get ripped off.
Yeah. And they weren't really on Twitter back then too much, so I couldn't really call them out for it either. But the other one was the very first interview with Jimmy Nielsen.
He said some cuss words in that one, right?
Yeah, because I went through like the, hey, how it was in Kansas City, how, you know about it so far, do you like it so far, or, the really standard, stupid, generic questions to kind of get used to somebody. And then I said, so what's your, what would you like people to call you? What would your nickname be? Because he had the whole gambling thing, Casino Jimmy and all that. And he goes, well, I'm known as White Puma and da-da-da-da. And then he says, but, if you want to call me Casino Jimmy, I don't care. You can call me effing this or that. He goes, I don't really care as long as they show up. And you're sitting over there going, oh, don't post that. Oh my God, he swore. And I'm like, he just became a fan favorite if I post it. And
I remember that as the PR guy being terrified. And then when it got posted and no one got in trouble, then it was great because everybody loved him.
Yeah, because he went from being pretty much a dislike guy because fans liked Hartman before that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was a good goalie, and they're like, why would we go to Europe to get a good goalie when we already had one? Because, you know, fans don't know the story behind, you know, why Hartman didn't come back with contract negotiations and stuff like that. Because basically, the agent, if I remember correctly, had both of the Wizards keepers as his clients. So both of them were out of contract, and he was basically holding both of them out to get them both more money. And Peter was like, yeah, well, we'll go get a different keeper. And they did. Well, and so everybody was like not liking the idea of bringing in this guy who's got a gambling problem and was at lower level leagues and, you know, et cetera. And all of a sudden when he said that, he was like, hey, I kind of like this. I will take credit.
Well, Nielsen, like in terms of free agents, he's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, he came in, fit in right away, great in the community, great player.
And a great captain too. I really respected him for how he led the team. He was always willing to talk, always, you know, he was honest. If they played like crap, he would say so, and probably in more colorful terms. But yeah, he was very honest and always like he would be there to face the media no matter what, good or bad.
I mean, yeah, he's like the ultimate kind of player. Like if you're going to say, what do you want the team to be like? You want guys like him.
Yep. So yeah, when you mentioned him earlier as a guy you'd like to have back, I'd love to have him back as a player ambassador for the team kind of thing, because I know he's got some other stuff going on right now. But we actually had him on the podcast before the season when he had just moved back to Kansas City and he wasn't set on what he was going to be doing for the future.
Gotcha. I don't even know what he's working on. I've just seen him post photos that he's here, but yeah, that's cool.
He's joined a business that he's doing some stuff. I don't know how much he wants that promoted right now, so I'll do that. But actually, I hope to have him on one of these in the near future. He said he would do it, and I know he would. I'm just kind of getting started with doing this, so.
Well, he'll be a big upgrade over me, so that's the good news for the audience.
Yeah, well, he'll probably use a colorful word or two.
That's funny. I'm not going to, but
no.
I'm sure he will. He's got nothing to lose, right?
Well, speaking of colorful words, what about Pascarella?
Oh man, Pascarella. I'm trying to think how I could tell stories without getting in trouble right now. John Pascarella is one of my favorite guys in the world. Like super nice.
Yes.
And could not cuss more. Like if you bet him to cuss more, he'd end up cussing the same as he already did. And so I have my 10-year-olds here beside me right now, kind of eavesdropping. Landon, you want to come say hi? He's like a huge soccer fan. He's been kicking a soccer ball in the house since he was in his diapers, walking around singing Sporting KC songs and stuff. But I would take him out to practice 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah.
And but that was the thing. Like I'd always say like earmuffs or okay, we're walking in, and we'd always walk in there at Swope Park, and you'd have to walk behind the goalkeepers warming up usually.
Yep.
And so Pascarella was always there. So I'd be like trying to distract him or talk loud or whatever. And I remember at one point he said something that was just this string of profanities. And then he looked over and saw Landon, and he said something like, really effing sorry about that kid. And it was just like classic Pascarella. And it just made him even that much more lovable that he was like a poet when it came to cussing. It was amazing.
It was basically punctuation and alternate breaths for him, I think. But he did essentially the exact same thing with my daughter, who, you know, I forget how old she was when she was out there with me one time. And I figured it was their environment, so I can't complain if they're doing anything, they're cussing or anything happens. It's their work spot, not, you know, my daughter was with me just because she was out of school and was too young to stay home. But yeah, at one point he's 20 feet away and just F-bomb after F-bomb talking to the keepers and this and that. And finally he turns around and sees my daughter and goes, "Oh, sweet pea, if I'd have realized you're here, I wouldn't have effing cussed." Without the...
I mean, that's him. That's him.
Yep. What's funny though is I told his wife about that story one time and she slapped him.
That's funny. It's really funny. I mean, yeah, he's a great guy, great family. He was one of those guys that, you know, for the most part, the PR guys, we'd hang out with the players a little bit on the road, but a lot of times we'd hang out with the coaches. So I remember going on a lot of walks with him, getting cups of coffee, grabbing meals and stuff. Just a great guy. Great guy. He's another guy I wouldn't mind bringing back, but
yeah.
Yeah, he was a good guy and just really funny, really funny.
Actually, he's one of the guys I have on my list of I'll contact if depending on how long this goes on. But I want to contact him to see if he'll come do one of these and talk about he's got one game under his belt as the coach of OKC.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully, I mean, I like being a part of this series, but I'm hoping it doesn't go on a lot longer. And I hope you're not sitting here in 4 weeks or 8 weeks still doing these.
Yeah, I hope not. But reality is probably will be for at least another month. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. What MLS has said, June 8th, right? No games until at least June 8th, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe we'll see training back and, hopefully we'll see training back sometime before then. And like you said, we ramp up for a couple weeks and
yeah,
it would be awesome to see games, even if it is empty venue or whatever. I don't know what that would look like, but it would just be awesome to see games again. I love watching the classic games and I like watching the stuff on Saturday night too with the player commentary. But the best thing about sports is it's like the best unpredictable drama in theater out there. So not having new games to watch where you don't know what's going to happen, I'm really missing that.
Yeah, no, I know. And I do I'm one that I hate watching old games for the most part. I can't be involved in them, so they're just boring to me. I watch them for analysis to see what people did or something like that. But I just don't sit and watch games that I already know the result of. But I've been watching these because there's nothing else.
It's better than nothing.
And I have, in credit to Sporting and what they're doing now with that stuff, the players' commentary on it, I thought has been good. I was afraid they'd be very reserved and not willing to say very much. And not that they've spilled too much tea there, but they have at least been, like, oh yeah, that linesman's terrible, or, that was a foul, and, things that was going on. So I've really appreciated those.
Well, if I can give a cheap plug, we started doing a final whistle post-game show for the Thursday night classic games. So we started that last week. We'll be doing that again this week. And as far as I know, for most weeks moving forward. So we, myself and Chad and Allie just watch the game live, take notes, and then come on and talk about it. And we can take questions through text and Twitter and stuff. So it's kind of giving us a sense of normalcy and then a little bit more content. But it was fun last week just watching the game and seeing some of those old sponsors. And there were some companies I'd never heard of. And then like a big sponsor was Fujifilm, who would I assume maybe they still exist, but they're definitely not a big deal like they were back in 1996. And
no, I keep waiting to see myself there, but the camera never pans to the right spot where I was at.
That's funny. Where were your seats back then? Did you have like a set spot?
Yeah, no, I had season tickets since day one. So I had the same season tickets up until the last year at Arrowhead. And it was row 1, seat 1 and 2 of section 201. So I was at the club level. And that was one of the cool things when they started was the club was open for the first so many games. So, I mean, I got to go to the club like, the rich people.
That's cool.
They didn't have the full food selection, but it was still some decent food, better than what you get at the stands and things like that. But by the last couple of years, they didn't even sometimes open food stands on the club level, even though there was hundreds of people up there.
That stinks.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's like when you had to go all the way to the lower level to buy a bratwurst.
Yeah, that's a long walk. Yeah, that stinks. Oh well. Better times now. No long walks for any food, and everybody's got a good view.
Yeah, I like my seats better now. At least usually where I'm at.
Yeah, what, field level, right by the field, behind the boards? It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really the best or the worst because you're either really in the action or it's so far on the other end that I'm just looking to see what shots I got on the camera. Actually, the new camera, I can get shots at the other end.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned that about doing the post-game show on the Thursday night thing because I didn't realize that. So I feel bad because I never actually get to listen to your radio show after the games because I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about it. I'm focused on getting interviews or getting photos or getting out of there and things like that. So I'll have to listen.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, we're missing the player interviews that we would normally have. We normally would run Peter's press conference and get on a player, but it's still fun just to kind of recap the game, because all these are great games. It's not like we're watching a 6-0 loss to Dallas or something like that. We're watching games that are great and memorable. So yeah, it's been fun. Like I said, we just started last week, but I know this week we'll be doing it again, going up against the NFL draft. So for anybody that doesn't want to watch the football draft, you'll have some counter programming from Sporting KC.
I guess they're having to do that virtually too, since people can't be together.
Which it'll be interesting. I mean, it'd be surprising if they don't have some sort of technical glitches, but I guess I'm fine if everybody but the Chiefs has internet problems. That's fine. We just don't want our team to be impacted by that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do that. No, that's cool. I don't know how long you had for doing this, so I appreciate the time you've given me.
Sure.
I probably need to go cook some supper for the family also.
I was thinking the same thing. So yeah, I don't want to go another hour, but we can talk about whatever. And then I think we're doing Taco Tuesday here. Yay. Landon's excited about that, apparently.
I would come to your house, except I can't.
Yeah, that's true.
I've got leftover taco meat from last Taco Tuesday, actually. So.
That's funny.
All right. No, maybe we can do another one of these next week or something. We'll try to get a couple, other people in. I'll have some very specific questions for you if we do it again, though.
Yeah. No, I know we're going to talk mainly about stories from the old days, and I'm sure there's a bunch more we could still hit on. So, yeah, if you want to do this again, just let me know.
Yeah, because now I can ask you about the players that were terrible the next time.
Give me more time to think about it. That's good.
No, again, I don't want to ever put you on a bad spot. But, I appreciate the time, Dave, and again, I appreciate the fact that you treated me seriously back when I was less of a nobody than I am now. So.
Well, I appreciate the coverage, because I was also pretty much a nobody, and nobody cared to cover the team for the most part back in the 2008 Wizards days. So you helped me, so I'm glad we could help each other, and obviously we became good friends. So it's been all worth it, man. Yeah, that's the bad thing is I don't ever get to see you anymore. I know. One of these days, I keep telling you, one of these days you need to just come sit in the Cauldron. And I got a ticket for you whenever you want to come up there. I know it's tough for you to take a break from shooting a game, but come up there sometime during an Open Cup game or something, and we'll hang out. Actually, I see you run by every once in a while when I'm driving out doing things. I'll see you hey, that was Dave. Yeah, I have a friend who lives up sort of in your neighborhood, because for people that don't know, Thad and I live a mile and a half away or something. So yeah, not even that, just basically two hoods apart. Yeah, I do a lot of running in Lee Summit, so I'm sure I'm in your neck of the woods quite a bit. Yeah, see you out on the main roads and stuff every so often, and wife's making me go out and walk now. There you go. All right. Again, thanks for the time, man, and go make some tacos. Have fun with the family. Stay safe. Stay socially distanced from everybody else. Yep, you too. Good seeing you, buddy, and everybody out there, stay safe for sure. All right. Thanks a lot, Dave. All right, see ya.